Shattering Red Chapter 6. 10-Year-Old Convictions. Vida awoke to the sound of crowing. She tiptoed and peered out the window. There was a flower box perched underneath with a large rooster greeting the day in joyous vibrato. Serna was out front, sprinkling food for the rest of her chickens. "Herschel!" she cried out, and the rooster jumped out of the box to worry after a batch of hens. "Sorry about him. Good morning! Rise and shine! You and Faust will want to go catch your breakfast before it's all gone." She waved a friendly, dismissive hand as she chased after the rooster, who was making more mischief. "Good morning." "Thanks," Vida waved back. She stepped back from the window and did a few quick stretches to limber up for her unknown work. She entered the main room of the house to find Faust already sitting at the little table. "Decided to join the living, I see." Faust tossed out the world's oldest dad joke to no applause. "Ha ha," Vida volleyed lamely. "Let's go. I really have to use the toilet." They exited the house and waved again to Serna, thanking her for the night and making their way to the dining hall. They passed the people smoking out front and entered the hall. The smell of warm hotcakes, syrup, bacon, and eggs hit them as soon as the door opened. There were mounds of different rice dishes and odd mixtures of food she didn't quite understand, so she stuck with what she knew. They were just getting out of the food line when the group of people from the night before, led by Jared, found them. "I think I got your work orders for the day. We already know what Faust can do based on how he helped us last time." He winked and Faust nodded. "You two are in luck. The past few years have been good to this community, and it has been again this year. Our fields are so crop-heavy we need extra hands in the field. We also have not been able to keep up with repairing our farm tools, along with numerous other little jobs." He ended the statement with a partially toothless grin. "I'll just have to ask what you're capable of, Missy." "What do you mean by that?" She tried not to sound contemptuous. "Have you ever worked a day in your life, sweetheart?" He laughed and poked one of her arms. "Only most of my life," she snorted back, rubbing where he poked. It had actually stung a little, and she hoped there wouldn't be a bruise later. "Let me rephrase. What kind of work have you been entitled to?" Jared raised a hand to quiet her before she could say anything back. Faust was barely chewing, prevented from doing so by the huge grin spread from ear to ear and fighting back the huge urge to laugh. "I only asked to sort you better. It doesn't look as though you work with your arms too much. So I wanted to make sure I put you somewhere that you would be useful." Faust choked a little on his food as he tried and failed not to laugh. Vida's contempt was clear across her face. "If you give me a task, I will see it through," she said in a challenging way. "Good," Jared smiled. "You'll be with the kids in the field. I'll give the supervisor of that area a heads up, and they will give you a crash course on whatever you're picking today." He patted her on the shoulder and disappeared into the hungry crowd. "I feel out of place here," Vida muttered into a bite of cheesy scrambled eggs mixed with green bits. The food, though basic, was so full of flavor it made her question if Aphthonia's food had any flavor at all. What do they put in this stuff to make it taste so rich? "Elbow grease and sun," Faust replied, finishing his own plate and heading back for more. The echoing voices around the hall were hitting their peak. It was 6:30 and the whole town was already up and eating. Vida just put together that the kitchen staff must live in the kitchen, much like she did the offices of the surrogacy center. Her job had required very little physically. That's what the Entomos were for. Faust sat back next to her and wolfed down a plate of waffles. "Doesn't our network factor in every need?" She poked at a tomato on the plate that did not reflect the taste of any tomato she had ever tasted. "Do things grow best under constant stress?" Faust asked right back. Why would a plant be stressed out in the perfect conditions? Vida was getting more confused with their conversation. Because only with life does one become flavorful. And the plants and animals in our food camps never get to live. They only get the synthetic of the best, and that doesn't leave room for what's needed for expression. "You do taste a difference," he finished, putting a large forkful of waffle into his mouth. "I really don't get it," Vida stated flatly, then took another bite of the flavorful melody. The crowd was starting to move on out, and the two noted and nodded to Jared, who was waiting for them by the door, eager to get moving. They both completed their breakfast as quickly as they could, then met the old man, who was talking to a very round, pale-faced child with blonde hair and wearing a simple red dress. She greeted them with a friendly wave as they approached. There were half a dozen kids waiting impatiently behind her. "Have you picked carrots afore, Vita?" the girl asked commandingly, while methodically looking her up and down. Vita smiled, amused by the tiny superior, then shook her head negatively. "Well then, hello. My name is Emma. I'm going to give you a rundown on the basics." Emma then gave her a quick jab where Jared had before. She watched Vita recoil slightly in pain and giggled, adding, "Every time someone new comes, he has to poke. Later, all his kids'll hear how you's more delicate than the tenderest fruit." The humor was lost on Vita. She grimaced and asked, "How old are you, Emma?" "I'm 10 years old and the oldest of our group." She stood up proudly as she said it, but then looked up at Vita and stated, "I guess today you're the oldest, but I'm the leader. How old are you?" 27. Vita almost instantly regretted telling the child this, because then she began to ask Vita as to why she was here and not married with babies. Vita looked to the older men for help, but they were walking away laughing. She had been ditched with a bunch of kids who were her superiors, and her arm was bruised and feeling a little tender. She couldn't let her disappointment show to the children, who led her out among the huge sweeping gardens. Children who had way more discipline than almost any child in Afthonia. Children in Afthonia were raised to listen or be loud, and usually they were very loud before they began to listen. The dirt pathways between the farms were bustling with herd animals and people leading them to whatever field needed tending. She noticed the kids would sometimes stop to exchange niceties with some of the passers-by or reach out and pet some of the massive half-elephant, half-tapir beasts as they lumbered past. These kids were just made differently. Vita was both impressed and interested in knowing what their education system looked like. They rounded a large pasture with a pond and a multitude of colorful waterfowl to see a picket fence with tons of greenery, which came just about up to Vita's knee. She recognized the carrot greens, but had never seen any get to that size. It was like a miniature forest of food. She noticed one outside of the fence and yanked on the tip of the greens. "You ever picked more than your nose afore?" The 10-year-old snickered at her own jest, then offered no apology. "By the root, see?" The girl went to the base of the plant. She squared her body, bent at the knee like this, and she pulled, and a long, dark, hairy orange root followed, still clinging to a bit of brown, which the girl shook off in her direction before handing her the whole thing. All the other kids had moved into the field to start their work. The girl giggled that Vita had recoiled from the dry flecks of brown. "What happens after you pick it?" Vita wondered, wiping brown flecks from her nose. She examined the colorful thing, noticing it had an almost spicy aroma. "You put it in a basket. When the basket is full, you take it back to the storehouse to the bigger wagon and set your tray on it. It'll get picked up later by the teens for processing," Emma stated, getting bored with their conversation. "Neat," Vita said lamely, before thinking to add, "You know, we aren't involved in making our own food at all, except for cooking it. Machines do it for us. It leaves us open to do more with our time." She didn't fully understand why she was getting so defensive. The girl was squinting at her, trying to figure out what she needed to say to get this big woman who knew not how to pull a carrot. That's when Vita realized her body was primally disappointed in her for not knowing something for her own survival as simple as pulling a carrot from the ground. "What more could you possibly do with your time?" the girl smiled, not understanding the amount of free time one could have without having to tend to food. "I help people practice medicine," Vita exclaimed happily as they arrived at the storehouse, where the girl pushed her towards a cart. She showed her how she could lay on the cart on her belly and use the tips of her feet to push the cart, put the carrots in the basket underneath, and just ride the cart through the fields. They got started side by side and got down in the groove of picking before Emma brought the conversation back around. "What kind of medicine do you make?" she asked. There seemed to be more working on her adolescent face, but she waited for the reply as they extracted roots. "Well, it's more complicated than that." Vita was trying to word her answer in a way the girl could easily understand. She didn't know what point of comparison this child had. "I'm not stupid," the girl said. "You can tell me." She rolled her eyes as if she had been patronized. "No, you're not stupid. I'm trying to find the right place to start so you can best understand," Vita said, trying to ignore the small aches already beginning in her arms. The girl brightened at the acknowledgement and continued to pick. She was faster than Vita, who was doing her best to keep up. "I think I have to start with a very poor history lesson first, if you're up to it." "Sure." Emma had slowed down a little to hear better, and Vita noticed a few of the other kids slow down for the new story that came straight from the stranger's mouth. A couple 100 years ago, a man invented a clean source of energy. He made a deal with our government, and the tech was free to use among any who wanted to learn it. There was a learning curve, but everyone picked it up easily, and it rebuilt and shaped our society. After the wars, the land had gone to ruin, but the group of people that met there decided that the best way they could survive was through their ability to work together as a community. The population was small, and not much was known, so healthy and successful breeding of the population was taken to a different standard. She paused here to get a drink, and noticed all the kids were now in proximity where they could work and listen. There were poor farms started and scavenged from seed. They found food from people, rebuilt out of nearby materials that they knew weren't toxic. So when technology was put back on the map the way it was, those things were taken to an extreme for survival's sake. My people were smart, and it made them prolific. With the nanotech, you can build buildings in a day and fill them with furnishing in a week. And while it can't replicate organic matter like your carrots, it can build all the outside simulated on the inside for optimum growth. Vita knew that last sentence would not make much sense when it left her lips, and searched for the right words as the kids looked at her in confusion. Large chambers filled with soil and fake sunlight to keep the food, whether it be animals or crops, safe from the outside. Computers to monitor the products so humans and ecological mishaps never happen. People could then focus on themselves without the worry of where their next meal would come from. She knew the children understood from their lost expressions of wonderment. "I had a cousin who took wool over for trade so he could see the city. He said your fresh food tasted rotten, and there were bugs in his bread," a young boy shouted, and the others laughed. "Grasshoppers are a traditional staple, and they taste great in bread," Vita snipped playfully. She never considered that others would think that was gross. The kids all laughed. "I do seem to think you guys have some secret to flavor, though. I never realized how dull our food was," she admitted. "It's 'cause you're eating sad food," Emma stated, pulling more carrots matter-of-factly. "I don't think plants can be sad, especially when tended to so carefully," Vita replied, quickly trying to get back to her job description. "So, our food environment grew very stable. And our technology changed to also get better in the medicine field. The nanotech field combined with knowledge of cloning allowed our civilization to rebuild fast. I work at a place called the Surrogacy Center. Over the last few hundred years, we've been producing clones to advance and better society." Her explanation only furthered the lost look in the kids' attention. "So you work with fake people?" Emma asked for everyone's sake. "No, they're more like inactive copies of people who once were. When people with good genetics pass away, they have the option of passing their genetic material along to the program," Vita tried to clarify. "She's a necromancer!" a different little boy exclaimed. "No, that's not what it is, and no, I do not facilitate the clone department," she sighed. "I help keep the paperwork organized for a top researcher." The kids all scrutinized her. "So you're a secretary?" a different girl piped in. "A researcher," Vita insisted to sideways glances. "So you research why people are sick all the time?" Emma asked. "In a roundabout way, yes," Vita answered, thinking it was close enough to be true. Vita responded. All the others had returned to work, and they picked in silence for a brief minute. The heat of the day was picking at her exposed skin. Vita was just beginning to feel why everyone stayed covered, even in the heat. "Do you ever think things are a little backwards where you live?" Vita had no idea where this girl was headed, but she was interested in hearing it. "A little bit, and recently more so." "What's your thought?" she asked, eager for the distraction from her burning skin. So you have a lot of sick people, Emma asked. Not so much physically ill. We monitor that. More mental health and minor health problems that, if missed, could be a problem over time. We find if we adjust for the needed nutrients, people tend to do better. Vita chatted while idly shaking out a carrot. The cart had 3 bins, and she had nearly finished loading the last. So, do you think if your food weren't so sad, you would have to treat all those issues? Emma assumed she was making sense, but this emotion tied to plants was not something Vita understood. We thrive off healthy plants. Vita wasn't sure what to say. Do your plants get sick? The girl questioned. No. The sick plants are weeded out. The computers keep everything ideal, so everything thrives. Vita internally wished that they were a little more automated here. So your plants never undergo challenges to strengthen them. The 10-year-old had lost her, and had noticed. You realize that there is powerful medicine in that? It's why your food is flat and you have sick people. I don't think the two are connected. That's a huge stretch. Are you happy? Typically? Emma was playfully hitting a chord with Vita's mental niceties. Like, after we all pick the carrots on a nice day like this, we go and hang out and play in the stream. Do you do stuff like that? Vita's thoughts went to her office, to home, to disappointing meals alone, of which there were many. Connection was difficult as an adult. That had to be the same here. She had to remember that she was talking to a bunch of kids, no matter how self-sufficient they appeared. Adults don't do that stuff. She tried to shrug her off. Adults do here, Emma replied. Standing up from her full cart, she smacked Vita on her ever-reddening shoulder and laughed when the woman jumped back in response to the pain from the sunburn. We don't rely on big government, and we all pull through mostly content. Maybe y'all need to grow your own food and taste a bit of life for what it is, not grown in a box. The girl then showed her where to take the full baskets, and they repeated the process until Emma dictated that they had picked what was needed. Aren't you 10? Vita asked. You sure seem to have it all figured out. The girl pointed straight into the air and yelled, Adults just overcomplicate things! It drew a nice laugh from a few onlookers. The child unabashedly took a bow and laughed with them. Will we see you by the river tonight? Emma asked as they parted ways by the mess hall where Emma left Vita by herself to wait for Faust. We will see. I make no promises, Vita waved, but that would be fun. The girl picked up on the negative-sounding answer and stuck her tongue out in response, then turned and ran away, disappearing into a thicket of grass. Vita was unsure of how people tolerated kids all the time. She took in the beauty of the scene while scratching at the growing number of bug bites on her arm. She saw the line of smokers outside was growing, the skunky aroma almost tempting after so much hard work. Her muscles were sore, and it looked inviting to lean back and relax. She decided to take her tired skin under the shade of a weeping willow near a small pond. No sooner had she fallen into a comfortable trance, watching the fish chase each other, when she felt a thump on her back. She tried not to choke as she cried out from the unexpected throbbing back pain. Your day was that great? Faust asked. What's with all the people hitting people on the back? Vita returned, still in pain. It's a sign of camaraderie, Faust contended. It's stupid! She didn't know why she couldn't drop it. It's only stupid 'cause you're in pain. He grinned at her like one of the kids she had ditched not moments before. Was your day that bad? No, I'm just amazed that 10-year-olds seem to have their mind made up on how the world works, she let out. How was your day? Did you have fun? The old man looked as though hard labor had not been on his list of things to do. I got to help them with gun repair and cleaning. His eyebrows waggled with pride for having such skill. How do you know how to work with guns? Vita had never known that about him. Aphthonia didn't allow guns, so how he could have known how to tend to them was beyond her. She had a feeling they were more complex than carrots. You pick things up here or there, Faust shrugged very unsatisfyingly. Let's go eat. They have a salve in the bathroom for sunburns. Check in the cabinet. He helped her off the rock, and they met back up at the table they had shared, with a decent pile of food for Faust and a lighter meal for Vita. She had gone with some type of cold soup and meat on bread, not so eager to touch food after working with it all day. Why do they need guns? Taking out large, unwanted predators or putting down a sick or old animal are the usual reasons. All adults are trained in how to use them. All adults, except the mentally disabled, are allowed to access them. There are few to no gun accidents due to training and how access is allowed. Wouldn't bullets cause metal poisoning issues over time? They use tantalum. It's the same thing you see their wedding bands are made out of. It's a super dense, safe metal, and it has served them well. Also non-toxic in the way they use it. Guns may not be allowed where you were, but here they are common and serve a purpose. What about murder? So people don't get murdered in Aphthonia? Happy people don't go kill other people, Faust stated with a shrug, digging into his food. Are people out here really happy? She muttered through a spoonful of soup, watching the room full of everyone who knew everyone. People bustling about with their own news from the day that they got to communicate with friends who all shared similar struggles. She had tried for this at home, but cliques were really small and never lasted. Toiling over the basics really brought these people together as a community. How could you not be happy when all the food tastes this great? Faust managed through a mouthful. Thank you so much for listening to Chapter 6 of Shattering Red. If this is something that you have liked so far, please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or do whatever it is that you do to make sure that you can follow along as I update what's going on. The book is available on most major retail online sites, and if you don't want to necessarily purchase the book, but you have been enjoying things so far, you can take a look at my Kofi, which is linked down below. Thanks so much. Take care.